Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Natural Love, Assistant Director for Community Engagement with the Office for Community and Civic Engagement at UNC Pembroke. Today, I'm via WebEx with Dr. Lawrence Locklear for the Community Engagement Virtual Workshop Series. This series was designed to emphasize the community partner and student experience by providing networking opportunities and collaboratively engaging in strengths-based efforts to further support community partnership and UNCP student volunteers. So I would like to share with you all just a little bit about Dr. Lawrence Locklear. So he is the director of the Office of Student Inclusion and Diversity and an adjunct associate professor in the Department of American Indian Studies, both at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. Dr. Locklear earned a PhD in Educational Studies with a concentration in higher education and a minor in Educational Research Methodology at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. He also earned a Master of Public Administration and a Bachelor of Arts in American Indian Studies, both from UNC Pembroke, and a Bachelor of Arts in History from North Carolina State University. So during today's presentation, I just ask that you be prepared just to gain a basic understanding about diversity and inclusion, along with essential principles and best practices that will help you build an inclusive workplace for students from UNC Pembroke. So if you are on, we just ask that you just be present with us today. Give yourself a chance to unwind. Feel free to use the chat box if you have any questions, but we'll be sure to also save time for questions at the end. All right, Dr. Lawrence, I'll give it over to you.
Okay, Natural, thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about building an inclusive workplace for UNC Pembroke's students. So I'm going to start with just an overview of what I plan to share with you today. So we're going to talk a little bit about diversity. I'm going to share a brief history of UNC Pembroke and then some diversity statistics about the university. We're also going to discuss what is inclusion, what does that mean, and related to that, the difference between multicultural and intercultural, how to become interculturally competent, and the difference between equality and equity. And then I'm going to wrap up the presentation with talking about some best practices for building an inclusive workplace. And that includes some resources that are available through UNC Pembroke. And then I'll answer any questions that you may have at the end. But before I start, there's some norms I just want to discuss for our presentation and sharing today. And the first is, let's keep this a safe space. Please feel free to engage openly and honestly about the conversation that we're having. Please respect everyone's ideas and opinions. Also, please have an open mind, heart, and attitude about what you hear today, especially about supporting our students. I want you to be an active listener, participant. So that means put your cell phone on mute and put away any things that might distract you. But also, I challenge you to take risk and explore your beliefs, particularly on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then last, but most importantly, please remember that what is shared here stays here, and what is learned here leaves here with you today. And so first of all, I'd like to start off by just telling you a little bit about student inclusion and diversity, in the sense that, diversity we know is very important to students, and that it enriches students' educational experiences and their holistic development. In the Office of Student Inclusion and Diversity at UNCP, we're committed to doing three very important things. One is developing interculturally competent students, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes and what that means, but also about celebrating diversity. And lastly, celebrating that diversity in an inclusive campus community where all of the differences that we have are embraced as our strengths. And so I want to ask everyone on the conference a question. There's going to be a couple of these during the presentation. So if someone had to ask you, what is diversity? How would you define that?
I would say that diversity is, so like, of course, I think of our campus. So diversity is basically a wide range of differences with people, and not necessarily always what you see. Right, so we're talking about ethnic diversity, racial diversity, but also socioeconomic statuses, first generation versus not first generation students, students with disabilities, students who are veterans, not veterans, different ages, male, female, LGBTQ community. So just basically, you know, different genders. So it's basically kind of I like a salad bowl theory. So like we're all a big salad bowl with different ingredients that make up the bigger salad, right? That wouldn't be so great if you didn't have all your ingredients.
And I think Leanne, you hit the nail on the head. The definition I was going to share with you of diversity, I think, speaks exactly to what you just said, and it's just understanding that each individual is unique and recognizing individual differences. And you know, when you look at the the Brave Nation community, you can see differences in race, age, ethnicity, sex, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, ability, faith, religion, national origin, citizenship, social and economic class, ideology, and a number of other identities. So we are a very diverse campus, and we know this, and we've known this for a very long time. And so in talking about UNCP, you know, diversity is rooted in the history of our institution, and that goes back to to UNCP's historical mission of service to the Lumbee and other American Indian nations, which dates to the institution's founding in 1887. So the school was established on March 7th of that year to train Lumbee teachers. Between 1939 and 1953, we were the only state-supported four-year institution for the education of American Indians in all of the United States. So we have a very unique history. In 1954, the university's enrollment was opened up to all students, regardless of race, as a result of the Brown versus Board of Education decision in 1954. And so campus enrollment has grown considerably since that time. And so today we have approximately 7,700 students, and U.S. News and World Report actually ranks us as among the most ethnically diverse institutions in the southeastern United States. So that's something that we're very proud of and we try and celebrate. And so as an example, I want to just show you the kind of diversity we have on campus. Our African-American students make up approximately 31% of the student body, American Indians 13%, Asian and Pacific Islander students about 1.5%, Hispanic Latinx about 7.4%, Native Hawaiians make up less than 1%, and white students make up approximately 39% of the population. Students who indicated two or more races are about 5%, and those whose ethnicity is not known is about 1.5%. So you can see from this diversity dashboard that UNCP is very unique in its diversity. And again, this is something that we're very proud of. And because of that diversity, UNC Pembroke is a federally designated minority serving institution, but also a Native American serving non-tribal institution. And in recognition of its historical origins, in 2005, the North Carolina General Assembly designated UNCP as North Carolina's historically American Indian University. But as I said earlier, diversity goes beyond ethnicity. And so there's some other groups that I want to share some data with you so you can learn a little bit more about who are UNCP students. Our commuter students make up approximately 73% of the student body. So almost 3 out of 4 students are commuters. First gen students make up about 29% of students based on gender. Female students make up approximately 63%. So almost 2 out of 3 students here are female. Our international students, we have a little more than 100 international students, which is about 1% of the student body. Military affiliated includes students who have served in the military and their family members, spouses, dependents. It's a broad definition, but that includes about 15% of the student body. Out-of-state students make up about 6%. And then lastly, rural students make up about 66%. So 2/3 come from rural communities, and most of those rural communities are found here in southeastern North Carolina. And so in talking about that diversity, one of the things that is important is to understand what inclusion is. So again, I'll ask this question. So if you had to define inclusion, what would you say it means, and what do you think being an inclusive campus entails?
So I guess Leanne is going to leave that to the other person to respond to your question.
No pressure.
I'm thinking about it more, Lawrence or Dr. Locklear, like all people. So regardless of the ability or the disability regardless of the location, healthcare, social, all of that, all of these things, we're defining that, different ideas, different subjects, different, all of that kind of stuff, if that makes sense.
Yes. Oh, I think that's very true. So going along with it, I think when you're talking about distinguishing between diversity and inclusion, I want to use this metaphor, and I think you've probably heard it many times before. Imagine that diversity is being invited to a party. So your friends are having a party. Diversity is inviting all of your different friends, different races, ethnicities, backgrounds, abilities to the party. But inclusion is being asked to dance, being invited to come to the dance floor. Folks are recognizing you for who you are as a person and your abilities. Some of us have great dance moves, some of us don't, but still, we're all getting invited to join each other on the dance floor. That is being inclusive. And so inclusion, when you think about it, inclusion is a verb and it requires action. And so that's going to be the key. And I think that's a key point to part of the presentation today. And so inclusion, again, it recognizes the inherent worth and dignity of all people, regardless of their differences. So being inclusive promotes awareness, understanding, engagement, empowerment, sense of belonging, and most importantly, respect for the talents, beliefs, backgrounds, and ways of life of other people. And so the great thing about today is that by participating in this presentation, this is the first step that you are taking to building an inclusive campus community, especially a community for our UNCP students who, as I've shown earlier, come from very diverse backgrounds. And so becoming aware though, is knowing the difference between multicultural and intercultural. You've probably heard the word multicultural a lot, but I wanted to take a second and talk about the difference between those two. Multicultural is just simply the existence of different cultural groups alongside each other within a community. So you can see the bottom left image, imagine the gray circle is your community, but within that larger community, you have different groups, cultural groups within that community. Now, intercultural, what the difference there is there's greater interaction between cultural groups in that community. You can see how with the intercultural image, those communities are actually interacting with each other. In a multicultural community, you have a lot of culture, but everyone operates in a silo. They just linger and interact with folks from that same group. But intercultural is there's mingling between those different cultures. And so in order to, a key ingredient to being intercultural is intercultural engagement. And intercultural engagement contributes to building an inclusive community. And you may ask, well, what is it? What is an intercultural community? An intercultural community is one where there's engagement between various identities and the exchange of ideas and norms to develop healthy relationships. It's all about being able to coexist with each other in ways that respects the identities for those in those other groups. And also an intercultural community should find itself constantly engaging with different cultural practices and ways of seeing the world. So being interculturally engaged is not a one-time thing. It happens on a regular basis, day to day. I mean, you're constantly interacting with folks from different communities. But lastly, the key thing that's important about that intercultural engagement is that our students, as a result of it, will be better prepared to engage and contribute to a diverse and interdependent global society. So as a result of that intercultural engagement, we are developing interculturally competent students. And intercultural competence is defined as cognitive, affective, and behavioral skills that facilitate effective and appropriate behavior and communication during intercultural reactions. So for example, when I'm having a conversation, so if someone knows that when two Lumbees get together for the first time who don't know each other, they're going to probably spend a good 10, 15, 20 minutes asking who's your people. And that's a cultural practice among Lumbee people that's important for identifying two very important things. One is kinship and one is community. And those tenets are at the core of Lumbee identity. So knowing that and being in that situation, you're going to know that when that question is asked, there is a reason for that, and it has huge implications. So intercultural competence just develops that knowledge for appropriate behavior and communication that develops those healthy relationships. And so you may ask, well, how do you become culturally interculturally competent. And this is a huge part of what the Office of Student Inclusion and Diversity is going to do moving forward. This is a conceptual framework that informs everything that we do. And so there's three, what I call phases to that. The first is awareness. The very first thing that you can do to become interculturally competent is to become aware of yourself, of your own culture. What is your identity or identities that are important to you? What are underlying assumptions that you may have? What values do you carry? Are there limitations to those? What's your worldview and what conscious and unconscious biases do you have? You can't interact and be aware of others if you aren't aware of yourself. And so within that awareness phase, there's also a development of knowledge or awareness of others, and that includes their cultures and then any similarities and differences that exist between your culture and other cultures. The next phase is understanding and knowledge of other groups. And what this is you just get to know members of other communities. And the great thing is that intercultural engagement gives you insight into seeing things from different perspectives. What you may see one way in your cultural group may be perceived differently in another cultural group. So that understanding gives you multiple perspectives that I think are going to be valuable, especially in a global society. And last, in that phase, don't be afraid to lean into discomfort that sometimes comes with growth. You know, in higher education, you know, we have a term, we talk about dissonance producing stimuli. And a lot of times situations arise that makes us feel comfortable, but once we go through those situations, we see that discomfort produced growth that was beneficial in the long term. And so, yes, getting to know people from other cultures may be uncomfortable at times, but there are many benefits to that in the long term. And the last stage is action. And this is just simply where you learn techniques for working with diverse communities. You learn how to combat biases. You learn how to facilitate the development of intercampus culture. You learn how to abate microaggressions and oppression that occurs with other people. So you can see in this cycle of awareness, understanding, and action, it's circular because I think it repeats itself every time you interact with a new cultural group or someone who's different from you. So it's not just a one-time thing. I think it's constantly occurring. And so in order to be interculturally competent, I think you need to recognize the difference between equality and equity. And you can see in this image I have on the screen, you have these three individuals, and what equality is they were all three given a box to stand on so that it would better position them to see over the fence. But you can see that the shortest of the individuals, even though everyone was equally served, can't see over the fence. Well, what equity is simply meeting the needs of individuals where those needs are at. You can see the first individual on the left does not need any assistance, but the individual on the right needs two boxes to be able to see over the fence. So equity is, like I said, is meeting students where the need is at. And a perfect metaphor for that is, let's say, for example, you see a bunch of kids playing on the playground. None of them have shoes on, and you're very concerned about them tearing up their feet, especially if it's concrete or asphalt, you know, that gets really hot on a hot day. And so you decide to give all the students shoes. But in a world of equality, you would give all those students the same size shoes. So everyone gets a size 12. The problem is not everybody wears the same size 12. So equity would be reaching out, finding out who needs shoes, and then giving them shoes in the shoe size that they can wear. And so that's the difference between equality and equity. And I think that's very important, especially when you're talking about creating a workplace. You're meeting students, an inclusive workplace. You're meeting students where their needs are at. And so this last slide actually talks about taking it a step further. And what liberation is you're just removing the barrier that is the success, removing a barrier to the success of those students. Instead of having to provide them with a box to stand on to see over the fence, why not just remove the barrier to begin with? And so I think that's very important that you understand the difference there. Now, this next slide talks about inequality, equality, and equity. And inequality is simply when there's unequal access to opportunities. You see the student on the left is getting an apple, and the one on the right is questioning, well, why not me? Equality is where you're equally distributing tools and assistance, so both get a ladder, the same size ladder. The problem is the student on the left has access to the apples and the one on the right still doesn't. Equity, again, is meeting the individual where the needs are at. You give them an appropriately sized ladder so that they both can access the apples. Now, to take it a step further, if you want to talk about justice, if you notice in this image, the big difference is that justice is fixing the system so that it offers equal access to both tools and opportunities. So in this one, both students have the same size ladder, that both have access to the ladder, but the apple, but the difference is you see the tree is now bent so that it's equally accessible to both kids. And so that is justice. You are fixing the system, the system, so both have equal access. And so I just want to take a few minutes and kind of share with you some best practices then for building an inclusive workplace. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the first ones is don't be afraid to lean into the discomfort that happens from growing. It's a natural part of the process. Everybody feels it. Just embrace it and just know that you will be a better person, a better leader, a better director at the end of the day. Being inclusive also fosters a couple of key values. One is awareness of others, understanding, empathy, respect for the identity of a student, mutual respect, and lastly, healthy relationships. Because if students know that you are understanding and you empathize with them and you respect who they are as a person, then they're going to be healthy relationships, and that's ultimately going to result in a more inclusive workplace. And so just remember, be inclusive of a student regardless of race, age, ethnicity, and you see all the other identities that are present here. Just be respectful of a student for who that student may be. And so some others are in your area, make inclusion and diversity a priority. There should not be any kind of workplace where discrimination is acceptable. And one of the first places to start with that is in your mission statement or diversity statement. And if you don't have a diversity statement, you should consider adopting a diversity statement, because by adding diversity to your mission and or adopting a diversity statement, that demonstrates your commitment to creating an inclusive workplace. Next, make sure you support all your students or your employees in their culture. Be supportive. And if you're not sure how, ask those students, ask those employees, because they will tell you. They know what's important to them and their culture. So just take time out to ask. Also, make diversity and inclusion part of the office culture. And that includes providing professional development opportunities to learn about other cultures, bring in diversity initiatives that include speakers, events. There may be diverse foods you can bring in, but develop a culture develop a work culture, that celebrates diversity. Also, listen to your students and team members. Again, I said ask them. I mean, take time out to listen to those students. They will tell you what's important. Cultivating empathy is also important, but also be authentic. You know, our students, we know they can tell someone when someone's faking it. So be authentic with them. I mean, if you don't know something, tell them, like, hey, I'm here to ask. I want to find out. They can appreciate and respect that more than someone who is not sure and trying to cover any insecurities that they may have about learning about other cultures. Just ask. Just be open about it. Also, I encourage you to take it beyond the workplace and embrace diversity in your personal life. The reason for that is when diversity is a part of your personal life, it builds comfort and communication skills with diverse communities. More importantly, or in addition to, I should say, seek diversity when hiring. Don't hire folks who look like you or believe in what you believe. Hire folks from diverse communities, diverse backgrounds. There's a number of those identity groups that you could hire from, but make sure diversity is important, is a key part of your hiring. Also, please address any complaints that arise. Take all discrimination complaints seriously and launch a prompt, fair, and thorough investigation, because those students want to know that you have their back and that you support them. So it's going to be very important that you can address complaints. So some other ways to create an inclusive workplace is through addressing conscious and unconscious biases. You know, a bias is a prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another group. Now, what a conscious bias, called an explicit bias, is one where the person is very clear about their feelings and attitudes and related behaviors that are conducted with intent. They know what they're doing when they do these types of things. Now, an implicit or unconscious bias is it occurs when a person is unaware of things and they are making, let me read this definition. So it operates outside of the person's awareness and can be in direct contradiction to a person's espoused beliefs and values. They may not be aware that this is a bias that they have. And a great way to think about that is when you're talking to someone and they tell you their name, they tell you what hometown they're from, maybe the type of institution they attended, maybe the type of degree they have. They might have an ethnic studies degree, or they may be from a minority serving institution, or you may know what hometown they're from, like someone saying they're from Pembroke or from Lumberton. There may be certain biases with that. I may tell someone I tell someone I'm a Locklear. Certain biases may come to mind about Locklears, maybe even Lumbies. Some of it could be conscious, some of it could be unconscious. There are other types of biases to be aware of, and one is an affinity bias. And more or less, that's just where you gravitate towards people who are like you. They may look like you, they may have gone to the same school you did, or they may have the same beliefs and backgrounds that you have. And that can be a pretty, I won't say dangerous thing, but it doesn't contribute to an inclusive work environment when you're hiring people because of an affinity bias. Everybody in the office will wind up looking like you at the end of the day. Next is confirmation bias, and that's a tendency to search for or recall information that confirms or supports your personal beliefs or values. You disregard everything else. You're just looking for things that confirm what you believe. Another thing that's important in an inclusive environment is evading microaggressions. And what a microaggression is just a brief and common daily verbal, behavioral, and environmental communication, whether intentional or unintentional, that transmits hostile, derogatory, or negative messages to a target person because they belong to a stigmatized group. And there's a couple of examples. One is failing to learn to pronounce or continuing to mispronounce the names of students after they have corrected you. If you don't pronounce their name correctly and you keep repeating it and repeating after the student has corrected you, that's a microaggression. Another is if you have a student who is a member of the LGBTQ plus community or trans community, and they have pronouns that they would prefer to be called, failing to use those pronouns over and over again, that's a microaggression. Lastly, using inappropriate humor in class that degrades students from different backgrounds. Those are all examples of microaggressions. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're trying to build an inclusive workplace, all of these biases and stereotypes and microaggressions can contribute to an unhealthy workplace, and it may ultimately affect your hiring. Next, when you think about your office, what does the physical environment look like in your office? When someone walks in your office, what message are you sending with the visuals that you see in that space? The photos you have in your office, are they of a certain group? Are they diverse? What kind of message are you sending with those optics? And again, some of it may be conscious, some of it may be unconscious. In your marketing materials, in your brochures, who is in the photos? What students are in the photos? I mean, they're a certain ethnicity, certain gender. Think about it. Also, with your physical environment, we live in the Bible Belt here in the South, and many times, you will see Christian related items on individuals, or folks may have them on their desk. But what other religious items do you see in your office? Are there any other religious items in your office? Are religious items allowed in your office? Just remember that if you're going to allow one religious group, please include everybody. I'm not saying not include religion because of that, but embrace all religions. Okay, make a place for everybody. During holidays, don't just celebrate Christmas and put up a Christmas tree in December. There's also Hanukkah, there's Kwanzaa, there's a number of opportunities. Embrace all the cultures. I mean, I love December. I love Christmas. It's my favorite holiday, but I love any opportunity to get together with family and friends and celebrate gifts and socialize. And so Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, those are all ways to do that. So embrace those. Another thing that's important is during certain holidays, like Halloween, be mindful of the costumes that employees wear. You don't want non-natives coming to work dressed as American Indians, especially Pocahontas or Chief, or actually, or anyone dressed up in any cultural costume. You don't want someone coming to work in blackface. These are all things to keep in mind during Halloween. Thanksgiving, get to know the true reason for Thanksgiving. And be mindful of asking American Indians, are you celebrating Thanksgiving this year? Get to learn the real meaning behind Thanksgiving and why it was started. So these are some things to be mindful of in your physical environment. Accessibility. You may have students who are interested in working with you who are visually, physically, cognitively, or mentally challenged. And so it's going to be necessary to have access ramps. If you're on the second floor, is there an elevator that would carry students who are in wheelchairs up to your office? Do you have automatic doors? The furniture, is it wheelchair accessible? Can a student in a wheelchair slide the wheelchair up under the table or desk where they're going to be working? The equipment that you use in your workplace, is it accessible to students who may be physically challenged? The software you're using in your office, can students who are visually, cognitively, or mentally challenged, can they use that software? Something else to consider that I mentioned earlier is diversity of your staff. When students walk into your office, will they see someone who looks like them or shares their identity or identities? It's something to consider. I know many of you may work in very small offices, and diversity may be a challenge simply because there may only be one or two of you. But if you're in a large office and you have the opportunity to create a diverse staff, please do that, and please keep that in mind. Now, one thing to do in your office for creating an inclusive workspace relates to the applications that students may use to apply to work in your office and any office documents that you may have. On those documents, yes, it's important to have the student's legal name, but it's also important to ask students their preferred name, especially students who are members of the LGBTQ community or those who have transitioned. They may not go by their what they call their dead name, and that's their legal name. So they may go by a different name than their legal name. So it's good to ask their preferred name. Gender. On your application, don't just ask for male and female. There are many students who have identities outside that gender binary. And so suggestions are on your applications include, for gender options, include male, female, transgender female, gender fluid, and not listed. And beside not listed, include a box for where they can write in their gender. And so always use gender neutral language if possible. Don't always say his or her. It's very acceptable now to say they instead. So please keep that in mind. Pronouns. If you are unsure, if you're in a situation and you're not sure of a student employee, just ask, hey, what are your pronouns? Those could be she, her, it could be he, him, it could be they, them. And when you're using those pronouns, if you make a mistake and you use the wrong pronoun, just apologize and then use the correct pronoun and move forward. There's no need making a big scene or big deal out of it. Just acknowledge you made the mistake, use the correct one, and move on. And so my suggestion is when you hire a student, create a student profile sheet, and on that sheet, ask for the student's preferred name, their gender, and pronouns. And that way you will have that information up front. It's very important also to create an inclusive workplace for the LGBTQ plus community. Be an ally, and there's multiple ways you can be an ally. And creating an inclusive workplace is the first way, first way to do that. Ask for pronouns for those students, but also include your pronouns in your email signature and on your website, because they may not know your gender, and that could be based on your name. You could be named some gender neutral names like, say, Terry or Robin, that when you pronounce those, it's difficult to know. So include your pronouns on your signature and your website. And ultimately, this is important because it prevents misgendering. And when you're trying to respect someone's identity, you do want to get their gender correct. And one way that we can help, one way to help with that is to take advantage of safe zone education. And that's where you learn about the LGBTQ community. Get certified in that. UNCP offers that. If your organization is interested in us providing some safe zone education, please reach out to me and I'll give you my contact information at the end of the presentation. Also, as I mentioned earlier, please make religious accommodations. You may have individuals of certain faiths who have certain times of the day that they pray. Please accommodate that. There may be certain type of clothing that religious clothing that is worn, and you can see an image on the screen. It could be a hijab, a burqa. There could be turbans. There may be certain hairstyles. Please accommodate all those. Please don't ask someone to cut their hair or not wear certain religious clothing, because you want to respect their identity, and also they have a constitutional right to practice their religion. And so be inclusive with your holidays, ceremonies, customs, and traditions. And also, it's important to know dietary restrictions. You have some folks, because of religious beliefs, who don't eat beef or pork. They may be vegetarian and they may be vegan. So, and if you don't know, just ask. That's another question you could ask to that profile sheet. Are you a vegan, vegetarian? Do you eat meat? Just ask. That's just the easiest way to address that. Now, when you're meeting with your students and getting to know your students, build a relationship. And that doesn't mean just talking about work either. Get to know their family. Ask them where they're from. What are their hobbies? What are their interests? Do they like grape ice cream? Do they like banana pudding? Some Southern dishes. Just ask. Just get to know them. Because I think students want to see us develop an interest in them as an individual. And so I think that's key, building those relationships. Also, just know that your students may come from homogenous communities. They may have grown up in a predominantly American Indian or predominantly African American or predominantly white or Latinx community. And being in a diverse environment may be something that's new for them. So just talk with them, get to know them. It may be important to know that. Lastly, just know that in certain cultures, family is very important, particularly if you have an American Indian student employee or a Latinx student. Family is at the core of their beliefs, and many students have family obligations or familial obligations that they must take advantage of. And so that may affect their ability to work in the office in case someone's sick or something's going on with their family. So just kind of keep that in mind. Now, many of the students that you're going to employ in your office belong to Generation Z, and those are students who were born between 1995 and 2015, and they have certain characteristics that are different from my generation and other generations. And so it's important to know that Gen Z students are very tech savvy. They text, they carry their phones. I think they're born with phones these days. I'm not sure. I haven't been in a delivery room in a while, but they put everything they know and believe on social media, and they text it. It's just all out there in that digital world. So, but also they perceive information visually. They're used to looking at things on their phone, social media. They watch videos. They are very visually oriented. They're also very independent, self-confident, and autonomous. So kind of keep that in mind when you are giving them work assignments, especially if they're tech savvy, they like to work independently. These are things to keep in mind. Also, many are environmentally aware. They're eco-friendly. So do you have a recycling program in your office? It's something to consider. If not, maybe a good time to start, especially if you have students who like to recycle. And also, these students like to multitask. And so, I guess just a few remarks to kind of wrap up with. A couple other last things is when you're working with students, please be developmental in your approach to them and their work. Always use every opportunity, whether it's a mistake or doing something right, to teach the student something, to use it as a learning opportunity, because at the end of the day, we want our students to grow personally, professionally, and intellectually. And so use that work to shape the students. Also, when you bring a student employee into your office, please review any office and professional etiquette that you want that student to follow in your office, because setting clear expectations is going to be key to their success. And as a part of that, definitely, if you don't have it, I suggest you create an onboarding and socialization plan for talking with students about office culture, policies, procedures, dress code, professional etiquette, you name it, all of the above should be shared with the student, because when you have those clear expectations, students will be more successful. And lastly, if you don't have it, create a bias reporting procedure, a way that if there's harassment or microaggressions or certain biases that are being exhibited in the office, develop a way for reporting those and also for investigating those. And so there are in my office a number of resources where we can help with some of the things that we've talked about. Student inclusion and diversity does provide a number of awareness or develop, facilitate and create a number of awareness and cultural events throughout the year. We also collaborate with a number of campus offices and programs to provide cultural awareness. We also provide safe zone education and other training opportunities. We currently do offer safe zone. We're developing unconscious bias and microaggressions training, and we hope to have those available very shortly. But we also have a number of online resources on our website that you can take advantage of. And especially considering the current climate, we have a number of resources on how to talk about race, anti-Blackness, how to be an anti-racist person. And so those are all available on our website. And so I just kind of want to wrap with this. We all know the statement, just do it. Well, I charge you or challenge you to create an inclusive workplace for our students, because a diverse and inclusive workplace promotes equal opportunities and students who are successful. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we want our students to be, successful. And so if you're interested in learning more about my office, just know we are located on the first floor of Old Main in room 124. Our office hours are Monday through Friday from 8 to 5 p.m. You can call us at 521-6508 or visit our website at uncp.edu/OSID. And we are on social media. Our handle on social media is Inclusive UNCP. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find us there. So please shoot us an email, tag us on social media, give us a call, drop by the office. If you're coming by the office, please bring your mask and don't forget to social distance. But we would love to talk from you and hear from you. And so I thank you for listening today. I hope that you learned some valuable information on how to create an inclusive workplace. And so now I want to see if you have any questions for me.
I guess I'll ask Lawrence. I love the idea of the student profile sheet. I think that's something I'm going to definitely share with Christy about, because I think that would be, I don't know, I think that would be something great to have. But I just wanted to make sure I have it clear too. You suggest that adding pronouns on like a space for like the pronouns, and then like if they have dietary restrictions, would that be suitable to go on that form as well?
Yeah, I would go ahead and just ask all of that information up front.
Okay.
That way from the beginning. And so, yeah, definitely put the gender pronouns, preferred name, dietary restrictions, and anything else and you may want to leave a box for any other accommodations or considerations, because the student, this could be a student that you have not met in person. Mm-hmm. So there could be some physical accommodations that may be necessary. So you may want to ask that question: are there any other accommodations that they're requesting?
Thank you.
I think sometimes too, so thank you, Lawrence, for the information. But I think too, the inclusive environment, like you were saying, our students are very tech savvy. And I know that what's been helpful in our office is we employ about 40 student leaders in our office. So when things are happening in the world, I also think it's best not to act like we don't know what's going on as an office and not address it, because sometimes I think coming to campus, this is their safe space where they can't necessarily talk to their parents about what's happening, or they may not feel comfortable because that's a different generation. So I know with what's currently been going on in the world, we, when our students came back to campus, we literally just did a check-in and was like, hey, we know that it's a difficult time in our country right now, given what's going on, but we wanted just to give you a space to talk about how you feel, share anything. And I think, like you were saying, Lawrence, I definitely agree. Like, be an ally. Just let them know, hey, I'm here to talk. You don't have to talk, but I think it's a really good idea just to kind of let them know that you know what's going on out there, and that, because we don't want to seem like we're oblivious and that nothing affects them. I think that's great as well.
No, I agree with you. I think it's best to be proactive. and just be up front. Go ahead and address any issues or concerns. I love the idea, like you said, of checking in with students and just give them the opportunity to express any concerns that they may have. Like you said, you may be the only person that the student can talk to about some certain situations in their life. If they have some difficult things going on at home or in relationships, you may be their only ally. And so take that responsibility very seriously. And like I said, be proactive and not reactive to students' needs, because when you're upfront about everything, I think it just helps strengthen the relationship that you can develop with the student.
And Angie, I just have an HR question for you.
She has left the bill. No, I'm sorry. She's back.
So if a student happens to have an issue with a employee, right? So a student employee, and they have an issue with a permanent employee on campus, what would be their process to, I guess, go through you all to file a complaint if they felt they need to?
Yes, absolutely. So I know you all know we've hired Dr. Nicolette Campos, and so she's creating all these e-forms to keep us also, Lawrence, up with the times with the Gen X groups. But yes, so we have a process here, and they would file that complaint directly with Nicolette, and then she will launch an investigation if necessary. So it's confidential. She's very professional. And so it's a great addition to our team.
Thank you.
And some of the things, I know this is from an employee perspective, we may not want on this site, but some of the things that the state and the university system are working on is like Banner, for example, and having that feature that you can elect your pronoun. You can elect your preferred name. As you know, in HR, we're the compliance role. So we have to have the legal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But we know that from the system perspective and all campuses that use Banner, for example, they're working on those preferred features that should be out with the next iteration, I understand. I thought it was a great presentation, Lawrence, and I love some of your simplistic examples, particularly the justice and the apple tree and the stair, the ladder. I think that's just like, so get it. I think it's an eye opener for a lot of people. And then, as you can imagine, we had a Braves kickoff event planned. And so we're still trying to do some virtual opportunity, particularly for the chancellor to have the university state of address. But we have identified some sessions also in our LMS, our learning management system. And some of those kind of sessions will be about what is unconscious bias, seeking confirmation of our biases, addressing biases to benefit the workplace. There's a manager's guide, for example, for diversity, inclusion, and accommodation. And so how to build that inclusive workplace. And so Nicolette's got her work cut out for her. It's great. We're excited to have her. So we'll be offering virtually some of those sessions for our Braves kickoff virtual event or whatever we offer in the next few weeks.
Sounds good.
Also, I wanted to ask you another question too, Lawrence. As you all were talking, I was thinking of a few other things. So as I think about like community partners and of course them being mostly off campus, I guess if some individuals within the organizations were finding it difficult kind of to have the conversation with our students when they're going out to volunteer about just the different issues or the different situations that we continue to face as a nation. I guess either like what could be something, I guess like a helpful process for them, or could that be something that they could, follow up with you all in your office as a resource? Like what would be your thoughts on that?
I mean, there's a couple things. One, definitely I suggest taking a look at the resources link on OSID's website, because I recently added a number of links about how to have difficult conversations, particularly about race. So there's information there, but also, yeah, definitely reach out to us. We're more than glad to be a resource to kind of help guide those conversations as they move forward. So yes.
Thank you so much. Now still leave the floor open. If Leanne or Miss Angela, if you all had any other questions or I don't know, just any comments, or Lawrence, if you had any lasting thoughts, anything you want to leave for viewers or listeners?
Yeah, lasting thoughts. I would say building an inclusive environment is not as difficult as it seems. Yes, it does take work and it is scary, especially if you're from a homogenous community and diversity is not a strong point of yours. But I do encourage everyone to lean into that discomfort that I talked about earlier. Because at the end of the day, it's all about creating a place and a space that is a place where our students can be successful and grow professionally, and intellectually and personally. And so at the end of the day, we want to do that. But sometimes it calls on us as the leaders in our organization to do the difficult things, to make the difficult decisions, like, or the hard decisions, like making a place more inclusive. So I challenge everyone to do it. I just don't encourage you. I challenge you to create that inclusive workplace.
Absolutely. And as Miss Angela said earlier, just thank you for an amazing presentation. I have a notebook full of notes, a page full of notes, and a lot of good ideas that I'm eager to share with my team. And also, as soon as this recording is available, just to share this with a lot of our partners. And it's on our website, and anybody really can have access to this. But I found that just doing these workshops and getting a chance to network and just have conversations about these issues that we continue to face, or different ways that we all, whether it's on campus, off campus, as a community, can come together and start to address these issues. I think it starts here, just through conversation, through resource building, which maybe some community partners, maybe some students, maybe faculty, staff didn't realize the resources that you all do have are available. So again, I thank you just for an amazing presentation, and just collaborating with us on this. If you all, whether you're listening or watching, tune in and join us on July 21st from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Ms. Vanessa Hall, she is the interim director / ADA coordinator at our Accessibility Resource Center on campus. She is going to guide you through a presentation or a conversation about working with individuals who have disabilities. So if you're free, join us there. It's available on our CCE webpage, and I look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you again, Dr. Lawrence. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you. Thank you.